Okay, I'll call the special council meeting to order. Pursuant to council's procedural bylaw, delegations are permitted to address the committee for a maximum of 5 minutes for those delegations that will be speaking. We'll be dealing with the first item, which is the Victoria Park Washroom Project update. I will advise that council will first hear from staff, then the delegations. While members are permitted to ask questions, or councilors are permitted to ask questions of the delegations, they should hold off on any discussion or debating of the tender to construct the washrooms until a motion to consider this matter has been approved. So in this regard, I'll ask Pauline Houston to introduce the staff report, and then I'll follow up with the delegations to come forward. Pauline, hang on a sec. Oh, she's on? Oh, there she is. There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. I'll provide a little bit of an overview. There's also staff from Facilities Management, Ms. Fletcher and Mr. Herget are here also to answer questions on this report. On September 16th, Council directed staff to revisit the project scope for the Victoria Park washrooms and consider potential ways of reducing the project cost to be within the $400,000 funding allocation that had been set aside for Victoria Park washroom solutions. We were also asked to determine the potential impact on the grant funding if the scope was substantially changed or if the project was not substantially complete by the grant program deadline, which is March 31st, 2014. The report details some of the ideas that we came up with in terms of reducing scope, and the report also talks about potential impacts on grant funding. The bottom line is if we were going to reduce the scope substantially by $150,000, the timing is too short for us to be able to complete all the necessary approvals and get a foundation in the ground before frost sets in December, which would close the window for construction from December basically until the end of March, which would jeopardize our grant funding. The other alternative would be to go into winter construction, which, as we know, significantly increase the costs of the project and also impacts the quality of the construction that we might receive. The other thing that we looked at as part of the report is to look at reducing the cost of the existing tender, and went back to the contractor, the low bid contractor, to see to what extent we could reduce the cost of the existing tender. In the report, you can see that consistent with the original report, the item that we were able to come up with was the change in the roof from the cedar shake roof that was previously recommended to an asphalt roof, which would reduce the scope by $13,000. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a couple of councillors with questions. Councillor Singh.
Yes, thank you. And I think this was good information to have to get some more clarity to this. Wish we had this earlier as well. So speaking to the CIF funding, so primarily with the timeline that you have in the report, if we were to delay this and have this rescoped, at most it would be very difficult to have it completed before the March 31st deadline. That's what I'm saying.
It would be very difficult to have it completed by March 31st. In fact, it would be difficult to have it started by March 31st.
Okay, all right. Now, I know with the CIF funding, we not only got it for the Victoria Street bathroom, but we had it to one other project, which was trails. This doesn't coincide with that, right? If we were to lose funding on this, doesn't mean there wouldn't be any clawback to that funding.
No, it's project specific.
Project specific. Okay, just wanted to reconfirm that. And the other question I had was to rescoping the project, and one item on it, I kind of looked at it and it kind of scratched my head because it didn't seem like a substantial thing. So staff have listed out, one was installing exterior asphalt walkway versus concrete walkway. This doesn't really have a complete reflection on the building design. It's more of an aesthetic exterior look and feel to the area. What would be the cost difference?
Staff did not go to the extent of determining what the full cost implications of the items that are on here would have. I don't think they would reduce it down by the full extent that you're expecting, and we thought getting costing at this point in time was really a moot point if we can't get the construction done in any event.
Do we not generally have generic costing for items like this, per square footage cost of something very, nothing majorly engineering specific as a walkway?
Through the chair, the walkway that we were looking at, it would be in the magnitude of $3,000 to $5,000 reduction in the overall project cost.
That's all I was looking at, because it was there on the paper. It's good to know exactly what the cost difference would be.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Evington?
Yeah, question for Pauline. Or wider than that, if it goes wider than that. Is there any possible way you can still review this tender and see if we can come up with savings in addition to the 13,000? Or is there any way staff can look at wider options to make up some of this money from, for example, park use or use of the commons? I don't know. I'm trying for anything. Are you satisfied you've exhausted every possibility on bringing that cost down?
In terms of reducing the cost, I think we have exhausted the possibilities within the current scope of what the project is. We have met with the low bidder to come up with additional ideas beyond the one that we had originally in the report. In terms of funding options, certainly there are a huge variety of funding options we could explore. Staff have proposed a funding option for the tender amount, so we haven't explored other funding options at this point since we felt there was a solution already in place.
And could you, I believe it's in your report, could you elaborate a little on the comparison of cost and dates for other public washrooms? I'm thinking of the one in McLennan Park in Councillor Singh's ward, and the Huron one, I believe, in Councillor Fernandez's ward.
Yes, the chart is included in your report. It talks about Huron Natural Area washroom, which was built in 2007. At that point in time, it cost $524,000. If we were to equate that to 2013 cost, it would be $586,880. That was a 500 square foot washroom plus an 845 foot picnic overhang, and that compares to 1,171 square foot facility that we're proposing for Victoria Park. In terms of McLennan Park washroom, it was built in 2010 for $524,200. In terms of comparable 2013 costs, that would be roughly $556,000. And it too was comparable to Victoria Park at 1,100 square feet.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I made a mistake there. I meant to say Huron is in Councillor Galloway Seelock's ward, adjacent to Councillor Fernandez's ward. Pauline, could you give me your opinion on this issue of price? So you quoted those figures. The figure we're looking at here is roughly $565,000 minus the $200,000. So that's a total $365,000 to local taxpayers from local taxes. Would you hazard an estimate on what it would cost us to build a similar building several years down the line? Let's say 2, 3, 4 years.
You're saying similar to what's being proposed? well, we can expect the cost will likely increase, probably by 2% a year, roughly, for every year that we have to postpone the project. And in that case, we would be paying 100% dollars because the grant would no longer be available.
Okay. And a question on heritage. There's been a lot of talk about heritage. I'm the council's representative on the Heritage Committee, and I also represent the ward that includes Victoria Park. So I really do understand, and I think a lot of other councillors understand, the major reason why we should consider heritage requirements on this building in a beautiful heritage park. So I wanted to ask one question. So far we've heard that this was approved by Kitchener Heritage. My understanding is that this would have also been approved by regional heritage officials because it's a heritage park. Am I correct on that? The approval for the washroom?
My understanding is you're correct, yes.
Okay. And one last question for Mr. Aguirre. Could you give me your opinion on what will happen to what sounds like very successful proposals for the future of the boathouse if the public washrooms are not built and there is pressure to keep the toilets at the boathouse building? And also maybe hazard a guess on how many potential operators would back off on their proposals. Mr. Aguirre.
Thank you for the question. The combined use of the Victoria Park Boathouse washrooms by a private operator and by the public is really untenable. It introduces significant complications with regard to the capacity of the boathouse and puts the onus of managing significant public issues unrelated to the boathouse itself in the hands of the boathouse operator. I would expect that all of the proposals that we get from private sector proponents would require complete separation of the public washrooms from the boathouse, and certainly if in fact I would almost not recommend moving forward if we don't have dedicated washrooms for the boathouse itself with the tender process.
So you would actually collapse the proposal issue for the boathouse if there were no public washrooms?
The lack of dedicated washrooms to the boathouse was a very significant issue for the previous operator, and significantly compromised the viability of the operation. And I wouldn't expect another operator to come forward without wanting that issue rectified.
Thank you very much. Some clarification, Mr. Acting Mayor. If I have comments on this, do I have to hold them until after the reconsideration vote?
That's correct.
And am I too early to say I would have a motion if it does pass reconsideration?
You'd have to wait till after reconsideration.
I appreciate that. Thanks very much for that clarification.
Councillor Scott Davey.
Thank you. Question, clarification. The existing washrooms adjacent to the playground, are they currently open to being operated year-round?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, actually, last season was the first season we actually opened them year-round. So yes, they are.
So they are presently opened
Yes.
all year round. Okay, very good. I just have one other question. I just want to be absolutely clear on one point. It was brought up the last time we discussed this, but rejecting this tender, does that mean that does that mean that we're not going to be building washrooms in Victoria Park?
By rejecting this tender, we will not be building washrooms at this time in Victoria Park.
But is it, I guess my clarifying point is it still not council's direction to relook at, we're not abandoning the idea of building washrooms, we're still going to be looking at different ways, different methods, less expensive options to build washrooms in Victoria Park?
Right, but we'd have to look at when we could schedule that into the capital forecast and when we could bring back a revised scoping.
Okay. And being that this tender was rejected entirely on price, should the motion consider not go through, would it, I guess the only appropriate way going forward might be to reconsider some of the options that we looked at before in the previous report on location and possible consolidation. Is that something that staff will be looking at, or does that require a motion to reconsider as well?
That would require a motion by council to reconsider because you already made a decision in terms of it would be a new washroom space.
Okay. Because again, one of those options that council looked at that we decided it was within striking distance was adding washrooms onto Joseph Street as well, which I recall was, can you confirm that was, the estimate for that was about $250,000?
I don't recall, perhaps Cynthia remembers.
Through the chair, that option was costed at about $180,000. Now, we will remind council that we currently have a tenant in that building, so that's now something that we would have to reconsider as well.
Okay. Do you recall too then, because the other option was the front garage, adding washrooms onto that structure. Do you recall the amount of the estimate for that?
For the 79 Joseph Street?
No, there was the 79 Joseph Street and there was the garage. Right, the building that's already in Victoria Park? That's okay, I can look it up after. My point is, there are other options.
Council approved, on May 7, 2012, it was options 2, 3, and 4 of the staff report. Option 2 was to put one single unisex washroom, look at adding that to the boathouse. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't an option that was preferred. The option 3 was the 79 Joseph Street renovation, and option 4 was a new washroom near Jubilee Drive.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Gazzola.
We applied for CIF grants. We had 7 items that you've listed. Were those items, are they in any kind of a priority listing?
That is the priority listing. So priority number 1 was the Centennial Stadium track, and priority 7 was the washrooms.
Okay, that was the lowest item in our priority. When we were given the grants, what other grants did we get?
We got grants for improving the trails. So it was asphalt surfacing for primary trails.
Priority 3.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, and that was it, just the 2.
That's right.
Now, were those grants, did the federal government designate that specifically towards the washrooms?
When they
Or
approved,
did we do that?
they approved specific projects, so they would have designated for trails and for washrooms.
Is there any understanding of how they would approve priority 7 over priorities 1, 2, 5, and 6?
I'm told that the process was not transparent to us, so we wouldn't have been privy to their selection process.
I do have an answer for that question. Member of Parliament Stephen Woodworth preferred that particular action be taken on the washrooms instead of the other 6. And so I understand it's to his office that it was directed to staff to go forward with this.
So he preferred item number 7 instead of number 1. At that point, where were we getting the other $200,000 from?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
No, when we figured out we were going to do the project for $400,000, we found out we were getting $200,000 from the federal government. Where were we going to get the other $200,000 from?
The other $200,000 was built into the capital forecast that was approved as part of the 2013 budget process. So the timing of the approval of the grant was the beginning of December, so that still allowed us time to build it into the capital forecast.
Okay. So, and that's the first, it came in the, in the capital forecast for that year, so nothing was bumped for it. The other, I'm not clear, did the region specifically, did the Regional Heritage Committee specifically deal with this project? If so, I would like to know when and see.
Through you, Acting Mayor, the region was circulated a copy of the Heritage Impact Assessment and the Heritage Permit application for comment only in recognition of the fact that Victoria Park is recognized as a cultural heritage landscape of regional significance, and the region would have an interest in any new building located within a cultural heritage landscape of regional significance.
Did they comment?
Yes, they did comment. They submitted correspondence in writing indicating that they were in support of the Heritage Impact Assessment and support of the proposed design of the washrooms.
At one time, there was question, and I appreciate it is not possible to have the washrooms as part of the boathouse. But is it not possible to put a set of washrooms attached to our building on the boathouse as a separate operation without affecting whoever leases the remainder of the building? Is that not possible to do?
I guess there's a couple of answers to that, but
It
it couldn't be completed in time for the federal or the grant program, for one thing. And I'm not sure what scope we could put on that site. Probably the existing scope of 1,100 square feet could probably not be accommodated on as an addition given the spacing, but perhaps others can comment on that. And it would also impact the original decision in terms of building a new building, so you'd have to revisit that as well.
But it appears that really wasn't considered, or was it considered? We seem to be not sure, you know.
Well, I think council narrowed down the number of options that they wanted considered for the public consultation, and we went forward with the ones that Cynthia had outlined earlier.
Well, I don't remember that one, but because the big roar was around the fact that the tenant couldn't manage both, and I can appreciate that. But to have something added as a separate part to the building that we own, I don't know that that was ever looked at. In the report, you talk about the fact, there's a big question here as to why council wasn't apprised of all of this sooner, and the fact that we were giving a D quote is because you didn't have enough time, we didn't have enough time, we had to move on. Why did we not get that nice chart that we find on page 3? Why wasn't that provided to council when they were going through those deliberations? Why weren't we told at that time, you're out of your mind if you think you can do something for $400,000? Here's some experience we've had. Why didn't that happen?
I think part of it relates to the timing of the decisions that were made. The grant funding was applied for in August of 2012, and that's when we determined the scope of being $400,000. And at that point in time, we had not completed our public consultation, and it was staff's guess at that point in time that we were probably looking at an addition rather than a full-scope new building. So when we were approved for grant funding in December, we put our funding in the budget, and it wasn't until the end of February that we actually knew that we were building a new building, at which point budget had already been set, so we proceeded to do a design to accommodate what was being scoped and come up with a detailed design. That's the first time we would have come up with an A or B class estimate. At that point, it was too late to adjust budget because budget had already been passed.
I'm not sure I buy that, but that's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. Couple of questions. Just going to, in the report, and unfortunately we don't have any numbers, so the listing that talks about where we're going to get the money from. So the $65,000 has already been identified as that was the roof for the Legion. Where would the $25,000, it says operations parks improvement, what would be put aside for $25,000 that wouldn't get done?
That is a general provision account for small projects. I don't know if there was some specific projects that we put as a lower priority. Mr. Herget's coming down. Perhaps he can provide some detail.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Actually, it was for Molochs, which are garbage containers, and park benches to the tune of $25,000.
Okay. And then the capital contingency? Where's that?
Capital contingency is a general provision that's in our capital forecast every year to be allocated by council to projects as you see fit throughout the year.
Oh, okay. So that's just money that's sitting in a reserve fund,
Correct.
Essentially. So that could go to anything.
That's correct. Capital in nature.
Okay. In questioning from I believe it was Councillor Singh, he had asked if you had looked at all the other ways of reducing the costs for the building, and you said that you had. Yes, is that correct?
In terms of reducing the scope down to $400,000, we came up with a number of ideas that we could reduce the cost. It's not an exhaustive process because at the point we determined we couldn't build the building before the grant deadline, it became a moot point as to how far we would take that costing exercise.
And the tender is now a public document, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So just from information's sake, I was sent an email by somebody who works in the industry, and the understanding is that about $75,000 of that cost for this building would be mason and bricklaying, and that the brick that is being used is U.S. premium brick. Why would we not be using local Canadian brick, which would cost us 50% less? And it would still fulfill the heritage component.
I don't know if facilities management staff can speak to different types of brick quality.
See, Mr. Chair, actually, we don't know that it's we know it's a premium brick. We don't know it's of a heritage make. That's the first I've heard about that, but.
No, it would fulfill the heritage component.
Correct.
So the question that I'm asking is, first of all, why are we sourcing into the States when we have local brick companies that could provide the same brick at 50% less cost that would fulfill the heritage component.
And that's a question I'd have to front to the contractor. Again, I'm not
So
privy.
there is possibility, my understanding now, from the fact that it's an open tender and I've received this information, to reduce at least 75,000 as well as more if we change the brick.
I think
to a local-
75,000 included mason. There was several items that were included in the $75,000, and we'd have to put in an alternate brick. So you wouldn't save $75,000. You might save a portion of that, but I don't know what it would be.
This is the quote from an industry expert who understands about building these buildings, has looked at the tender and has given me this information. So this is an expert who knows what they're talking about, and the understanding here is that the $75,000 could be saved by using a different mason and bricklaying company, as well as we could save 50% on the cost of the brick if we used Canadian brick instead of American brick. So I just want to make sure that information is out there. I don't know who that is. They sent me an email, but I don't know who the company is.
Well,
Then that's privileged information. I'm not going to share that publicly.
why, Yvonne?
Okay. My next.
Oh, by who?
I'd suggest if Councillor Fernandez has this information, that she table it and we delay the whole procedure. Or maybe she wants to suggest that we approve the washrooms and build it out of Canadian brick. But without any facts, I can't figure why this would even come up.
I think the question was, had we exhausted all the abilities to reduce the cost of this building? And this was the information that was sent to me, because it is now an open tender document. So anybody in the industry can take a look at that document and send in a tender. Unfortunately, some of those tenders cannot be considered because we are only allowed to accept tenders that are from a unionized mason and bricklaying company.
Mr. Chapman?
Through you, Acting Mayor Unesky, certainly this is the first that we've heard of this question. If it's a material issue that's important to the committee, I'd suggest that it's appropriate to have the head of purchasing or the buyer come down and address council in terms of what in fact was included in the specifications, and if this is in fact true, to comment on perhaps why the specification would have been written on that basis. So I'll leave it in your hands whether or not that would be helpful, but I'm certainly happy to step out and have the buyer come down and speak to this issue if that's committee's wish.
That would be fine.
Sorry?
That would be fine.
All right, you faded out at the end there, Mr. Chapman. I didn't catch the last part of it. Could you repeat it, please?
I was simply suggesting that this is the first time this question has been brought forward, and rather than speculating on the contents of the tender specification, if this is a significant issue in the minds of the committee, I'd suggest that we can bring down the head of purchasing or the buyer that can in fact advise council in terms of what was included in the specification and why that may have been the case.
So, okay, Mr. Wilmer.
And before council puts its mind to that question, I think you should put your mind to the question is, are you or are you not going to reconsider this tender? Because if you're not going to reconsider the tender, that whole point is moot.
That's right.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilmer. I would suggest that the nature of the comments, in my opinion, right now, to some degree may lay its weight in terms of becoming more of a debate. So I would, although it ended up being in terms of a question, it's tending to go in a different direction as I see it right now. So, but we really haven't reconsidered the motion yet, and we're only supposed to be asking questions, of which we are, but sometimes the answers lead in a different direction. So I would say to Councillor Fernandez, if you still got further questions to ask, please feel free to do so.
That's all my questions.
Okay. Mr. Councillor Dan Graham.
Thank you very much, Acting Mayor Yanetsky. In terms of the add-on to the boathouse, would there be heritage considerations and complications to that whole exercise? Because it's a heritage feature, is it not?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Yes, any addition to existing buildings within the Victoria Park area, because it's a heritage district, would also require the submission of a heritage permit application and approval of a heritage permit application.
And do you have a sense of how long that would take to work through the system?
Well, we do have submission deadlines in terms of applications, but from the date that we receive a complete heritage permit application, we can typically process that application within 5 weeks and get it on the agenda, typically for the next Heritage Kitchener meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Before you go on, Mr. Regier has a comment.
Just a little bit of additional information on that. As we've discussed, we're anticipating a very significant renovation to the boathouse as part of the move going forward, the new lease and so on. One of those components will be the relocation of the kitchen from the west end of the building to the east end of the building, including some additional facilities. So there are some design considerations which need to be taken into account, and there could be operational impacts on future operators in terms of access and egress into the building for materials and that sort of thing, right? So it's adding these washrooms to the east end of the building. It might be technically possible, going through a heritage process, but may also have significant implications for the lease, which we hope to operationalize in the next several months.
Thank you. Since price is one of the main points of contention here, and if we were to forego the $200,000 federal money, what kind of standalone washroom, since that's what council approved, could be built for $365,000?
Actually, it would be $200,000 is what council's approved in terms of funding.
No, I understand that, but since I'm looking at the current expenditure that we're looking at is $565 minus $200,000, I'm wondering if price is the only issue, then what could be built for $364, for instance?
Through the chair, if you can indulge me for a second, no matter what we build on the location that we're currently looking at, there will be consistent costs of bringing services in, whether it's sanitary, water, or electrical and hydro to that site. So that's going to be a cost no matter what we put on top. And I'll give you an example, an additional comparator. We built a concession stand at Wilson Park that has 2 washrooms on the back side. And the cost to build that facility was $425,000. And the only amenities that you have in terms of washroom is 1 fixture for male, 1 fixture for female. It's a block building, and it's got a metal roof. So, if that puts it in some kind of perspective,
that
I think
does.
for $200,000 or even $350,000, we would be challenged to build much beyond a block building, probably metal roof, and probably 1 fixture each.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there I believe there's a component of glass block in the building? Is that that's not a heritage element, is it?
Well, it feels like a tag team here. Through Mr. Chair, actually, yes, in the front vestibule, that's we have 2 glass block walls.
Okay, I guess they would be more expensive than brick.
Not a lot. Again, it's a masonry that has to lay them, so it's not a lot. We looked at from an architecture feature, and we actually looked at for durability. They do take a lot of abuse. So,
is that a SEPTED or safe crime prevention element as well, or
no? Actually, you know what? Yes, that's a good point. It is, because you can actually see into the front vestibule and beyond.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Good point.
Thank you.
Okay, there's no. Oops. Just popped out. Councillor Davey.
Sorry, just to save some time here, because I understand we might be getting someone to come in to speak to the specific, brick that's going on in the building. Before we do that, assuming for the moment that somebody comes down here and says that, yes, we could substitute brick that's going to save us $30,000, does council have the ability to actually do that, or are you just going to hear the rationale as to why that brick was chosen?
Through the acting mayor, I think part of the question will be whether the detail of the heritage permit speaks, and I looked at the heritage planner, as to the specific nature of the brick, whether a change in the type of brick would require going back to Heritage Kitchener, potentially back to the region, and back to council with the heritage permit. And I don't know whether that's the case, whether the heritage permit gets that specific about the specifics of the brick.
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, the heritage permit application was specific in that it did identify a specific type of brick by manufacturer name and style. With regard to the requirements and this for the heritage permit application as part of the Victoria Park Plan, it speaks to using natural materials, brick being a preferred building material. Heritage planning staff would probably need to consider any new brick and compare that to the brick that had been proposed as part of the heritage permit application to see how close it would match. Is it still a red brick? Is it still the same dimensions? And is there a substantial visual difference in the brick or not before we can determine whether it needs to come back to the committee or not?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have no further councillors who wish to speak. Next, as part of the procedures, we have 4 delegations here, and our first delegation is Anna Mast. Just as a reminder, all delegations have a maximum of 5 minutes to speak.
Anna Mast had to go and pick up her children from school, so I'm Shirley Goslin, the president of the Cherry Park Neighborhood Association, and I'm standing in for her. So I'll read her submission. Dear Honorable Mayor and members of Council, her name is Anna Mast, and she's one of the co-chairs of the Victoria Park Association. She was here to ask you on behalf of the residents of the Victoria Park neighborhood to reconsider the tenders put forth for the construction of the Victoria Park washrooms. While we appreciate the need to watch municipal spending, there are several factors that need to be taken into consideration with this project. We recognize that much of the expense that was above the originally budgeted amount comes from adhering to heritage requirements. But we feel the need to point out that the homeowners in the Victoria Park neighborhood are required to adhere to heritage requirements when building or renovating their own homes, often at a greater cost to us. It would be unfair and setting a poor precedent for the city not to adhere to its own rules in this regard. Secondly, we also recognize that a significant amount of money has been put into the Victoria Park area in the past few years. This is because the park has become one of the central locations in the city's efforts to draw people downtown, which involves many festivals throughout the park over the summer. The cost of not having adequate bathrooms in this area is already borne by the city, an increased need for porta potty rentals during city-sponsored events at the location, and increased maintenance to the commons areas as a result of the porta potties' usage. Spending tax money to improve the park and trying to increase use of it is of little benefit if there are no washroom facilities for the people to use when they are there. Thirdly, there is already well understood, and it was agreed upon by this council, that the boathouse requires its own separate bathrooms for a host of reasons. With the venue about to change hands, and having the question of where new washrooms will be located up in the air, may put a significant damper on the number and quality of proposals being submitted by prospective operators. Finally, there is the $200,000 in matching federal funding available for this project, which is contingent on it getting underway almost immediately. Delaying this decision in order to try and shave off any less than the amount off of the tenders is incredibly short-sighted and would just end up costing us more in the long run. I implore you to reconsider the tenders and get this project underway as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the delegation? Nope, thank you very much. Oh, John Guzzola, Councillor Guzzola has a question of the delegation. Okay, would you please come up?
You've put forward some reasons why we should move forward. Could you tell me what the most important one is in your opinion?
If we don't go forward now, we lose that $200,000, and God knows when it will fit into the budget to get washrooms there. So if it's put off, we're talking years down the road before we get anything.
But you can't be speaking for God. We might be getting those washrooms in other ways. So the other question I had is that you talk about the heritage component adding considerably to the cost of the $565,000. How much really is the heritage component adding? I think this is just an excuse that's been running around as to what the heritage is adding to this project. I don't think that the heritage component is adding that much. What is it exactly? You've mentioned it in your, do you know what that figure is?
I'm just going by what they were saying earlier.
Okay.
I have a 110-year-old house. I put a large addition on it, and I made it look like it's 110 years old, and it's going to cost less than these washrooms. I got brick from Chicago, from houses the same age that were being torn down. So
that's a good point, and I commend you for keeping our heritage going. Thank you. My final question is, do you not have a problem, though, with where we're going down the road when we start to overspend the budget by 41%? Does that not cause you some concern?
it's always a concern if we perennial go over budgets. But as the comparison table showed, the washrooms they put in other places which didn't have heritage considerations were around the same price as this bid was. So maybe the budget was unrealistic.
Thank you.
Councillor Davey?
Just one quick question I'm going to ask of the delegations. In terms of walking time in minutes, what do you think is a reasonable amount of time that someone should have to walk in Victoria Park to get to a washroom?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, our next delegation is Nicole Rasmussen.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want you to reconsider your decision to refrain from putting extra washrooms in Victoria Park. If you do not reconsider, we will lose $200,000 grant. I consider that to be easy money, really. I agree the tenders came in way over budget. Ideally, the site chosen for the washrooms would merit a building that would become a part of the heritage ambience that we've taken great pains to preserve. I served on the Public Advisory Committee to ensure that our lake is restored and preserved for generations to come. I don't think a little bit of money spent now would be more foresight than I think a waste of money. Because what is it going to cost for the future? That's an add-on. I applaud Council for following through to success on this important plan of action. I know that if we come together, a solution will be found for this washroom situation. Perhaps if everyone put their heads together, this will be accomplished. Failing that, there are other options that we considered through an open house on this very issue. I voted on this issue at an open house. If, as you say, you value the merit of another operator taking on the responsibility of leasing the boathouse, then this washroom issue will need to be resolved and in place, and fairly quickly, too. That is if you truly wish to create a situation that benefits both parties. The new operator cannot continue to offer the public his washrooms. That is totally impractical and unsafe and unfair. About the boathouse, the brick on the boathouse, we were talking about bricks earlier. My husband tells me, he's here, he's a mason, and he tells me that that brick is available in Canada for half the price. So a comparable brick is likely available. So this is what I mean. If we put our heads together, we can find ways of skirting the situation and of coming in close to budget or closer to budget. And I think the heritage aspect, though, however, is important. Should we not proceed, there will be no place on or near the commons to use the facilities. Even if the playground washrooms are open, the walk is too far for many seniors and families with children who have to go right away. I have to go right away. I'm a senior, so 5 minutes, well, it's hard to plan that, it really is. We've grown so much as a community, and with that growth, there is much evidence of increased use of Victoria Park. We love our park. I loved it as a child, and I love it now, and I love it even more for the restoration of the lake. I think the use has just increased so much. The festivals that go on there, I think we can take such pride in our park. But if you don't have a place to go to the bathroom, and for all those people, I mean, what have we got? One place? It's not enough. All you have to do now is agree to continue to seek a solution and discuss this further until an acceptable solution is found. I believe that our opportunity for the grant is over if we do not have a plan by the 31st of March. And I hear today that we have to have that building started. So we have to get on it. Please correct me if I'm in error with regard to this date. I want you to try a little harder. That's all I'm asking. And I've seen you do that, and I've seen the results you've come up with. And believe me, you're an incredible council, and my hat's off to all of you. The questions that you ask are really pertinent, and you represent us well. But this is not just for the Victoria Park Neighbourhood Association or the Cherry Park Neighbourhood Association, of which I'm a member, but of all who come to our park. Lastly, I want to thank you for all that you do on our behalf. I am sorry that this presentation is short. I hope I do not appear either abrupt or disrespectful. I'm a novice and with very little preparation time to reach out to you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak.
And we have three councillors right now. We should ask you some questions. Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you, Nicole, and you did a wonderful job. Even if you were a bit nervous, you covered a lot of the area. And I want to thank you for confirming my 50% price on the Canadian brick. Do you understand where that $200,000 comes from?
Our $200,000?
The additional $200,000. Do you understand where that comes from?
I don't.
Okay. So essentially it's federal money, but you know where the federal money comes from, right?
Yes.
It comes from us.
It comes from us.
Taxpayers.
Yeah.
So essentially it's taxpayers funding. Whether it comes to us, it will go to another city, municipality who may be able to.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're still benefiting each other. You understand that? Okay. Did you know that it is more than a 5-minute walk to get to the washrooms at Huron Natural Area if you're in most areas of that park?
I would say so.
Okay. And that the McLennan Park washrooms have been closed for most of the summer. So going to the washroom in McLennan Park was in a trailer for most of the summer. Mm-hmm. You were aware of that?
No.
Oh, okay. Just wanted to give you some information as well. Thank you so much.
Councillor Erdington.
Nicole, thanks for coming in. You're very active in that area, so I really appreciate that. You were on the committee that helped push forward I think it was over $10 million
yes.
to clean up in the park. Mm-hmm. And you were you took part in the public meeting that chose where the washroom should be.
I did.
Okay. So you're very active in that area, you know the area. The comments that have been made about the washroom at the splash pad end of the park, it's way up the other end of the park, and we've already gone into how many seconds or minutes you need before you have to use a washroom. I'm not going to take you there again, but have you used those washrooms up at the other end of the park?
No, I haven't.
Is there any reason for that?
Well, no. There's no reason at all. I had the washrooms at the boathouse, really. So why would I go to that length to go to a washroom? My choice was there.
Sure.
And, yeah.
The choice of washrooms, I just wanted to suggest here, the choice of washrooms either at the boathouse or at the splash pad are pretty disgusting facilities. Yeah. I think everyone agrees with that. One other question I wanted to ask you had to do with the boathouse. You and your husband are supporters of the boathouse.
We are, yes.
Mm-hmm. And I hear from you frequently.
Yeah, you do, don't you?
That's okay. That's great. So, can you understand what impact this would have on the boathouse? Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I mean, do you really want to get me started on the boathouse? But I think that I've heard Kevin complain about it. I've heard about him having to guard that the miners don't come in that way. So he has to have extra security on. He has to pay extra staff. He has to keep those washrooms clean. He has to be vigilant as to what they're doing in the washrooms. Now, someone who had a liquor license of 76 people or 80, whatever it was, would really not to have to pay too much attention to their washrooms, I think, other than, to check on them every hour to make sure there was enough supplies and that they were clean and that there was no incident in there. But to have to keep people out that were minors, to have to take a policing security kind of outlook toward it, I just think that would be, I've been in the hospitality industry myself, and that to me seems to be really a ridiculous thing to have to bear as the owner of the boathouse. I don't think you should ask the next one to do that. I'm not against looking at the other options. I know that the heritage aspect would be lovely. I just wonder if we couldn't have a shell of a washroom building and then add the heritage later. I don't know, because we do have someone living in the park that runs a school of architecture, and it might be a nice little project for them to come in and heritage the look of the place. So I don't know if it has to be done right away. So this is what I'm saying about putting heads together and thinking, and it's a big park. And I don't know if McLennan Park has the number of people coming to it that Victoria Park does. I really don't, honestly. Councillor Fernandez,
Nicole, one other question. Sorry to interrupt, but
sure.
What do you say to people, because I hear the argument over and over and over, well, enough money has been spent in Victoria Park. How do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, either that or you let it fill up with silt and forget about it. I mean, this was our option. Option one was do nothing. And if you did nothing with the lake there, then it wouldn't be a park anymore. It would be a field. Maybe a soggy one for a while, but it would be a field. And that's really because of many things. Industry and the silt flowing down through the waterways that we changed with the channels, put the concrete channels in there so that the natural ecological makeup didn't collect the silt, so that went into the lake. I mean, it boggles the mind that lake was created to make ice for our ice boxes, and I do remember ice boxes. It just boggles the mind that here we have this beautiful park built around it. It's really a miracle when you think of it. And, I think it's incumbent on us to maintain the heritage of this and to maintain this ambience for future generations. I really believe strongly in this. Having been born here, grown up here, I have my baby pictures there. Who can say that amongst us? So it's a matter of pride for me, and washrooms are a necessity. And if they have to look like heritage, fine. Then so be it. I mean, when you're considering the money that we spend on the transport that's coming up, the ION, that's a whole lot of money. And you have to have foresight to believe in it. So do you not have to have foresight here too, to spend a little bit extra?
And one final question, Nicole. I'm not going to continue to insult your intelligence with the lessons on taxation and where the money comes from. You obviously would understand that if money comes from the federal government, it's taxed across Canada to
Yes.
millions of people. Thank you.
Councillor Gazzola?
I have the greatest respect. You're doing a great job here. I thought you'd have done it more often. And I do want to commend you for your being active in things that go on in our community and in your neighborhood. You always put forward your concerns. You don't sit back. You put them forward so we hear the other side, and I appreciate that. I don't always agree with you.
No, you don't.
In
Hopefully this time.
No, no. I'm concerned with your. What is your biggest concern in this situation here? Is it the losing the $200,000?
Well, that's a big thing.
Yeah.
If it were my personal budget and I was going to be losing $200,000 if I didn't move on it, but I stood to gain by spending this money, this amount of money, even if it's $365,000 to make $200,000, how can you turn that down? I don't get it.
Well,
you know, it's to me in my head, it's a done deal.
It's a question of whether the end justifies the means.
I guess it is.
Yeah, and that's.
Yeah.
I do, your point, and I think it's an important point, is that there are ways of getting around this. There are going to be washrooms there. I don't think anyone around this table is arguing against washrooms. So there are going to be washrooms. And I would suspect they're going to be there in the very near future. It's this whole question of $200,000. That's the question that I think everybody's having trouble with. And you've said it time and time again, you know, we're not stupid people here. Let's put our heads together. Let's get around it. So I think it will happen. I do have to ask you, though, are you not concerned with a government that is prepared to overspend a budget by 41%? Isn't that a pretty rocky road to start down?
Of course I'm concerned, but I think you're really good at what you do. I think you can find that money, actually. I mean, I manage the Granite Club. I manage the Alabama Steakhouse. I know what statements look like. I know, how you could rob Peter to pay Paul. Just switch it around a bit.
Okay, you're actually where I've asked it to go back to the drawing board and look at it again, and we can work it out. Yes. So you are concerned about overspending at 41%.
Of course.
Thank
Of course
you.
I am. And I don't blame you for being either, because you're a money man. But you're a money man with a heart. No. And
well, by the way, I don't have any pictures as a child there, but I do have pictures of all my children in Victoria Park.
Yeah.
And I want to add, standing in front of the flag that was in the center of the pond, which we've taken away now. There's no longer
I know.
there. Thank
Sorry.
you.
Okay, thank you. No further delegations. Oh, Mr. Wilmer?
Yep. Okay.
Mr. Chair, just to respond, the very last paragraph on the first page references we need to have a plan by the 31st of March, and please correct me if I'm in error. So I just wanted to make it clear that it's not a requirement to have a plan by March 31st. It's a requirement to have substantial completion of the building, which goes back to why we need to have a slab poured before the winter conditions, which goes back to the point as to why a decision needs to be made on this today, not 2 or 3 weeks from now, not a month from now, not by March 31st. If we want the 200,000, that's correct. Yeah. So it's the emphasis here. It's not to have a plan in place by March 31st. It's to have substantial completion of the building.
That's correct. Thank you. Okay. No, I meant to say there's no more questions for the delegation. Our next delegation is Cindy Ward. Sorry if I scared you with the wrong words there. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you for having me at council today. I'm a resident of Victoria Park, and I was actually one of the first owners of the boathouse back in 2004. So one of the reasons I'm here today is listening to my friends and colleagues talk about this concern, and I thought maybe I could provide some insight as to what it looks like from, say, an operator's perspective at the boathouse. I have put together a little list of an argument that was, I think, passed around earlier, but I know a lot of the points have been addressed at this time. Perhaps more questions can come out later. I think one of the things that I would like to indicate that I've heard mentioned a few times is that it might be it may make things more challenging to find a really good tenant for the boathouse if this particular issue isn't solved. It's hard to have negotiations if there's still a lot of questions up in the air. So, for instance, I believe Councillor Gazzola mentioned, well, possibly one of the solutions is to make an addition onto that building, and if we have one or two of those walls that can just be added on to, that might save some costs down the road. From my perspective, I can only see it happening on the side where the air conditioning thing sits or the side where the takeout window sits, and I actually think that it would diminish the appeal of the look of the boathouse and possibly not work out for any tenant or leasee. It would perhaps interfere with operation if that was to be one of the solutions. From the perspective of being a tenant in the boathouse, I believe the previous delegate had mentioned that it's very challenging to have bathrooms that are open for both the public as well as the patrons of inside the boathouse. I distinctly recall during my time there that sometimes you will get the odd patron that will rack up a little bit of a bill, say they have to go to the bathroom, and disappear out the other side, and you never see them again. There's also concerns with the Liquor Control Board. So you can't have minors sneaking through the open bathroom doors. So it just seems improbable for any potential tenant to want to deal with that particular issue. So it kind of needs to be solved, in my opinion, going forward in good faith with any proposals. Everyone has mentioned this grant for $200,000. Of course, and also it's been mentioned that we certainly don't want to have a government that likes to go, goes over budget more often than not. So we don't want that either. But I believe the point also came up that perhaps the budgeting in the first place was a little bit low, considering these other two park bathrooms came in at $550,000 to begin with. So I just think going forward in good faith with any potential tenants for the boathouse, that this issue should really try to be solved, and that would make that kind of process be much smoother. Also, my last point here is, how far is it to walk over to the playground bathrooms, and are they really nice bathrooms to use? I have a 7-year-old daughter, and we spend a lot of time in Victoria Park, so she's a little older now, but I know that with a little kid, you don't want to spend more than a minute or two, and that's, and I certainly wouldn't, it would be a bit of a trek with little ones and strollers and whatnot to get over. So I think obviously bathrooms are extremely important for their proposed location. That's about all that I have to say, if there's questions from anyone.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the delegation? I have a couple here. Councillor Singh.
Thank you. You know what, Cindy, I appreciate you coming forward, and as well as the other delegations that have come, in recognizing and encouraging us to take into account the importance of having bathroom facilities in Victoria Park. And I think I recognize that, and I think it's I wouldn't be wrong to say that most members or all members around this horseshoe are very supportive of having bathroom facilities in Victoria Park. But that's really not the question. So I want to give you some encouragement that I think there's a good reflection on our part of taking in the importance of having bathroom facilities there. The real question is the tender that we're really looking at. a tender that has come significantly higher than we had anticipated, 40% higher. So primarily at this point, we are looking at all options that are on the table. Would you think that's really fair and appropriate for council to be considerate and be mindful of cost overruns and be reflective and to ensure that we look at all options before just saying, okay, we definitely think that it's needed, let's just say yes to it because of the overall importance of it?
I do agree that by looking at all the options, that's due diligence that we would expect from council, so I appreciate that. And coming forward here today, one of the things that never really crossed my mind is that, that council did not want to proceed with bathrooms. So I think, in essence, we get a sense that people are agreeing that bathrooms are important. And in many ways, it seems to be coming down to being over budget and acting now rather than at some other point in time. And so I think you guys have a job before you to sort that out. At the end of the day, from my personal perspective, being a homeowner and understanding what building costs, et cetera, are going to be, and having dealt with heritage issues in the past, it would be a real challenge if these bathrooms, say in McLennan Park and Huron Park, were not less than $500,000. How do we expect to shave enough off to meet a $400,000 budget? It seems a little bit out of line.
Well, and we want to take that opportunity to take a look at that.
Right.
But I appreciate that you get that point, that this council recognize the importance of bathrooms there. Yeah. And I agree with you. I don't think this can be a couple of years down the road. We have to build it into the next year budget somehow. Or perhaps make do and make it work within what's on the table right now.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Gwen Graham.
Thank you very much. And Cynthia, I appreciate you coming forward, and your perspective is very valuable. We heard from the other delegations about the $200,000 and about that being something they didn't want to lose, but I wondered, and you have it in your proposal. So I just want to ask you the question directly. Are you offended by the fact that we're one taxpayer, and this will be money coming from another pocket, federal money? Does that disturb you? Do you think it's fiscally irresponsible for us to be spending money to leverage tax money from the federal government towards this project?
It was an interesting point, and I see that perspective. Just to give you a little background, I'm now a PhD student, and my income is paid by federal grant money. And all my fellow citizens basically are helping me survive. So at this point, I understand that federal monies do come out of every Canadian's pocket. However, I think that's part of the system. We quite enjoy federal and provincial transfers, so I think we should take advantage of it. That's my perspective.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I do have a question for you myself. Maybe you can help me out to try to understand how we should consider this as councillors in terms of voting on an overspending. If you were buying a house through a builder and sat down with them and worked out an exact type house plan that you want with bedrooms and features, etc., and he came back and quoted you $400,000, and then after he went back to the drawing board and just started getting his things to get it ordered, and then found out he made a mistake and comes back with $560,000, $160,000 over budget. What would you do?
Well, obviously, I'd be quite upset about that. Now, I'm a little bit late in the game, so I wasn't really sure how that budget was set in the first place, the 400. Was there a proposal by somebody suggesting, laying it out, that it would come to that cost? No. So where did 400,000 come from as a budget? I guess it just seems like if we didn't get a proposal, like if the city hadn't received a specific proposal that, boom, 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 here's all the items, and this is going to come to $400,000, if that had happened, and of course then they come back later and saying, oh, sorry, we made a mistake, it's an extra $160,000, that would be very upsetting. But if the plan to build wasn't previously laid out and budgeted, for that specific $400,000. If it was just kind of a number that was estimated at the time, then perhaps that was not a wise budget at the time.
Well, basically, if you were buying from a builder, you'd probably have a reputable builder who has been in that field for a while and would know what to do. We here as council basically rely on staff and their expertise from past experience, and they did quote you a couple other washroom facilities that were built and using various criteria, because not each building is the same, so you got to try to put the puzzle together somehow and come up with a figure, and they estimated initially $400,000. So I was just throwing a question out to you to see, would you follow through with it or just say forget it?
Well, I would have to question that, of course. I mean, it just seems it's a very big challenge to know that going forward, we may have, as a city, we may have to be stuck with higher costs than were anticipated, and that is always tragic. I guess, but at the end of the day, you have to balance or weigh out where the importance lies. I have a sneaky suspicion it will affect negotiations with a new tenant at the boathouse. So depending on where the council's priorities lie, you're right, at some point maybe it could be looked at in the future. I would just hate to see it get slipped under the table and not be addressed for several years. And this is just a little bit of a follow-up here. When I first was given the boathouse to be an operator in 2004, I heard every single year from somebody at the city here, the lake is being dredged next year. And so it's 2005. Oh, the lake is being dredged next year, 2006, the lake is being, and we heard this every single year, and it got dredged in 2012. So there's a 6-year delay. And again, because of my personal knowledge in that area, I just have a concern of too much of a delay could be costly in the long run as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Galway-Zelok.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you the question in a little bit of a different light that Councillor Yunetsky just asked you. So say you were purchasing a home for $400,000 and you were going to get incentives of $200,000, but you were getting a product worth $400,000. And then they came back and said, actually, your portion is now going to be $356,000, but you're still getting a product for $536,000, right? So you're getting $200,000 of incentives, but you're not paying the full $400,000 that it would cost you later down the road. Would you accept that deal? Because in essence, you're still getting a incentive of $35,000 towards your home.
It sounds reasonable. That's fine with me. Maybe council has knowledge of other funding opportunities should this one expire.
No, that's not the case. I just want to make sure that it's an apples to apples comparison, because while we had the estimate of $400,000 in the beginning,
yep,
we basically are getting the $200,000 grant, which if you're looking at it in the home perspective, we're still going to end up with a portion of a grant from the government. But if we don't do it now, it'll cost us more down the road. So yep, I just wanted to make sure that it was asked in both ways. So thank you for answering.
Okay, thank you. No further questions. And we have one final delegation. Harold Druitz.
I just love watching these debates. I don't have a handout on this issue. I guess I represent suburbia. I had an excellent meeting last week with one of the managers regarding the downtown and the surrounding area. I want the Boathouse people to know that in 2011, I joined you and I spoke in favor of your position. Now I think the taxpayers and the city officials have done an excellent job on the Boathouse facility. Now I'm going to exaggerate here to make a point. Are we building a recreation room with an attached washroom, or just hopefully a functional washroom? I hope we're building a functional washroom. There was a lot of criticism here regarding the budget and the 400,000. On this one, I'm going to side with staff. I think 400,000 is pretty reasonable for a washroom when you consider what the cost of a house is. I'd like to encourage council to stay within the budgeted allocated dollars, and staff, if necessary, simplify the specs using less labor-intensive material and construction. That's the end of my presentation. Unfortunately, I need to leave pretty soon because my real boss called me, and that's my wife. Thank you.
Okay, we have one councillor here. Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Drivets. Just wanted to ask you about the total cost that you're thinking of the washroom. You're thinking it would be $400,000. That's what you're prepared to pay?
I'm not sure I'm prepared to pay that. But that's what's in the budget, and that's approved, and okay. I'm prepared to go with that. But,
right. So if the current spend would be $365,000 with the $200,000 additional monies from the federal government, is there a problem with that for you?
Not really.
Okay, thank you.
I have no further questions here from anybody else.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's it for the delegations. To move forward on this, where we are right now. Okay, I'm going to ask Paul Singh to... You have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I had a question of staff, just from some of the discussion that was had with the delegations. Just a quick one.
Okay.
It may be helpful. So, from the various discussions that we've heard, and from staff, I've heard one of the biggest reasons to, we're looking at expediting this, and we need to have it in a timely manner, is because of pouring of the foundation. There's a time it takes for it to cure as well. So, if you were to go back and rescope, we would be pouring at a later time, in which case we can't meet the March 30th deadline. So speaking to that, whichever staff can appropriately answer that question, can we not separate the two? Can we now look at pouring the concrete now? Because that's not a huge extensive thing. That's going to be within a margin, of course. It's going to be quite close to in line with the most charged cost per concrete and, of course, the labor aspect of it. At that point, we can lay the foundation, but then we can look at the rescoping of the project to try to build it within what the appropriate budget was set at. Do we have the capacity to do that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think what Councillor Singh is describing is sort of a two-phase project, if you will. And what I would have to check on is whether that's a significant change in scope where we might have to retender the project. And the reason that I say that is the contractor has put in a bid based on sort of guaranteed work for a period of time. So I'm not sure what the impact would be on the contractor to say we want to pour a foundation right now and then say wait 4 months to...
The reason why I asked this question is obviously this council saw the need for a bathroom in Victoria Park, and that's why you approved it within the budget. Of course, leveraging on the CIIF funding as well. But at this point, because of the overrun, I wish I had thought of this last week, in which case we would have had appropriate time to go to the contractor and ask that. But I think that may be relevant information, but I'll leave it to staff and for committee to discuss.
I guess another consideration as well is without a design in terms of, if you remember me talking about bringing the services into the building, so we'd have to know where we're putting sanitary, the water and electrical, and in terms of where plumbing would be going. So, no, we don't necessarily know all that if the intention is to pour the foundation and then rescope the project.
Oh, sorry.
The rescoping would be to the aesthetics of the building, and we've heard, a lot of questions have been raised, and I think they need to be answered. And unfortunately, we're stuck in a very confined time frame right now. As to the brick, as to if you can look at some less costly materials that still conform to the heritage aspect of it. Can the design be changed, keeping the same square footage, keeping the same area, but the aesthetic or the materials used that heritage would still be acceptable to? I think those are the real underlying questions at this point. But the square footage and the location, I don't think that's really changed.
And through the chair, I think if we go back to the report that was presented last week, I believe the heritage aspects of the project were approximately $40,000. So I guess I'm looking at rescoping the heritage aspects of the project. They weren't the aspects that were taking us significantly over budget.
Okay. Well, I guess then staff's answering my question. It wouldn't really make a difference then. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Well, I guess we're at the moment where we have to make a decision here. And what we need is to have a mover and a seconder for reconsideration of a motion to debate this. So the floor is open. Councillor Etherington.
Yeah, before the motion has been circulated, and I'd be glad to read that, but I wanted to make one slight change. I noticed...
Well, you're out of order. You can't talk about the motion of what you want to bring forward. We have to talk about reconsideration only.
Yeah, that's the motion I'm talking about, Mr. Chair.
Well, the motion is we can reconsider or not.
No, the
and
motion...
then once we do that, then we can consider your motion.
This is the motion. It's in front of you. And what I wanted to do was change the last 3 or 4 words because it's no longer applicable.
I'm going to ask the city clerk for his interpretation comment.
Through the chair, the motion as printed on the circulated document was what was considered at the previous council meeting, and therefore any amendments that need to be made to that motion, you need the reconsideration first prior to making any amendments to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have to have a motion on the floor to reconsider whether we move forward or not. No, just to move forward for reconsideration. That's what I needed to say that. This is not the original wording.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
Hang on a second. I'm just looking at the council minutes of... Okay, Mr. Wilmer, hang on a sec.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. If it helps to clarify, the substance of this motion is that the September 16th motion be reconsidered.
And that reconsideration is, in your opinion, the same as...
That's what this says. The first paragraph, pursuant to the section, so on and so on, the following motion be reconsidered. It's the September 16th motion.
Okay. I'll accept that. Thank you. Hang on. So we've got a mover. Councillor Etherington. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Gazzola. And you also have a question? Okay. Councillor Ioannidis.
I just want to clarify this. We have to have first a motion to reconsider, and then we have to have another motion to deal with it. So there are 2 motions if the first one goes through. So I want to clarify that.
That's what I was trying to state earlier. So this one has to be dealt secondly.
There are 2 motions. First to reconsider, and then we have another motion.
Okay.
Through the chair, to clarify, essentially the reconsideration that you'd be voting on is the first paragraph of what was circulated. The secondary clause underneath it is what was passed at council. By passing the reconsideration, all you're doing is bringing that before you for consideration. So you're not taking any action on the second clause. Essentially, you're just saying, should we reconsider the motion that was defeated at September 16th council meeting?
Okay, is that clear for everybody? Okay. So do you have a mover and a seconder? Okay. Okay, record a vote. Well, to speak on the reconsideration or to speak on the boathouse? On the washroom, you should say. Mr. Clerk, clarification?
Through the chair. With respect to motions to reconsider, comments are to the merits of reconsideration and need to be restricted to whether or not you should vote for reconsideration. They cannot pertain to the motion that's under consideration, so you can't talk to the merits of the tender. All I can do is say whether or not you should seek reconsideration.
Okay, so we can talk specifically only on the reconsideration. So, Councilor Guzzola, I got you up first here.
Yeah, I'm not sure where to go on this because...
Could you speak up, please?
I'm not sure where to go on this because, I'm not opposed to the washrooms. Can I say that? I suppose I can't say that. I mean, I think the whole question here is the taking a federal grant. Okay, this is the stumbling block for everybody and everything. Okay, and I cannot support that because we're going down. There are a lot of reasons. We have done a poor job on this project, and when I say we, it's council. I'm not blaming. I'm not talking to staff. The buck stops here. We've done a poor job on where we've gotten to. I'm debating the tender.
That's a point well taken. We really should be talking about reconsideration. Although if we talk about reconsideration, it's very difficult to be black and white without making references to how it's been that's all that's happened this afternoon in terms of the debate, plus the delegations and the past. It's a very difficult situation to try to interpret as to whether we should have any debate on it or not, or just do the motion and vote on it. But then, as the clerk pointed out, we can talk about it, but I think we have to stick to the motion itself. Mr. Clerk.
Through the chair, if the reconsideration is successful, members will have an opportunity to debate the merits of the tender at that point, and then to discuss the various aspects of the tender. So there will be an opportunity, subject to whether or not the reconsideration is approved, to allow for the debate on the tender itself.
I appreciate those comments, but I also can appreciate the comments that are being raised to whether we should reconsider or not reconsider. And I think maybe that's where Councillor Guzzola was going towards. But as I pointed out, sometimes it becomes difficult to try to go in that direction without trying to bring back and bring up the other related matter that goes with it. So I was listening to him and I was debating as to whether to stop him or not, but I thought I had to listen to him a little further to see where he was going on this. So and I understand where Councillor Galloway-Zelak was coming from, because she may have been of a different opinion. What I'm going to do is I'm going to allow some comment to be made on whether we should reconsider or not. But if it becomes in a way that I would see becomes a debate or an opinion, in terms of the pros and cons of having the washrooms, as opposed to the reconsideration of the washrooms, then I may have to stop you. So I will allow Councillor Guzzola to proceed at this point in time.
Okay, I'll be very quick and very brief. I will not support a notice of reconsideration because it's dealing with an over expenditure of 41%, which to me is a very rocky road to start down, and I cannot support that action. It is really totally a question of whether the end is justified, the means justify the end, and I cannot support that. So I will not vote in favor of the reconsideration.
Thank you. And just as a comment to all of the speakers here, that it would be clear that you make your position straightforward right at the beginning as to whether you're supporting or not, and maybe you can give your comments on why you are or not right after. Councillor Singh.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll try to do the same. I think I'll support the notice to reconsider, the motion to notice to reconsider, primarily because we made the decision in our earlier meeting, council meeting, void of a lot of the voices, the delegates that came forward that represent as to their input. And I think it's a reflection as to resident feedback, and it would be appropriate for us to give that opportunity to vote on it accordingly thereafter. That's not to say that I've changed my mind. I think I'll have to allow for appropriate discussion to be had, and I have some further questions also. But I think it's appropriate to support the notice to reconsider so that appropriate discussion can be had, and along with questions.
Okay, thank you. Before I call the next speaker, I just should mention that we are moving on in time. We're still only on the first stop, and we've got 2 more items to deal with as part of the special council. So just a matter of your attention, and then we'll see how the vote goes and then take it from there. Councillor Etherington.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the reconsideration. I will obviously support reconsideration for the many reasons that we've heard. The other thing I wanted to point out in relation to reconsideration, we're considering new information, the information about the other washrooms built, when they were built, the cost of those being built. So that is new. That's a good reason for reconsideration. And the other reason, my other large reason, is that the information we've heard about the boathouse from Mr. Regier, showing how severe an impact that could have on the boathouse, that it could torpedo the boathouse. And so I would argue, in the name of transparency and fairness, for other councillors to consider reconsideration. We need 6 of 9 votes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Galloway-Zilog.
I'll support the reconsideration, and my main reasons to support it is the new information brought forward in the report today, and also with the new information that's been brought forward with respect to the brick. I think without rescoping the project, we can still look at decreasing the costs with the tender, so I will support reconsideration.
Thank you. Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thank you very much. I will support reconsideration. I was not party to the initial debate. I would like to have a voice in that debate. I do appreciate the new information and the questions that have been asked, particularly by Councillor Fernandez about the brick. So I do think there's an opportunity here for a solution.
Thank you. Councillor Scott Davey.
Actually, I had no comment. Thank you.
Okay, I have no other speakers. Okay, there's a request for a recorded vote. And you can vote now. Everybody voted? Sorry, hang on a sec. I didn't flip this. Oh, this is the done button. Okay. Yeah, the reconsideration of the motion has been defeated. So there's no more further discussion on this topic. A second. There we go. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Just, I guess, I want to get some direction or an idea of what's going to happen at this point, because clearly I think all members of council want to see washrooms in Victoria Park. At the same time, we've identified a specific location, and we've also turned down a tender that was that we thought was too high. So my question of staff would be, I feel like we've sort of backed you into a corner saying that we want something, but for less than you can ever tender it out as. So does staff think it would be beneficial if we were to revisit the previous report in terms of location? I guess the rationale behind that is we did have other options. Ms. Fletcher mentioned, I thought the Class D estimate was $250, but she mentioned $280,000 to potentially add washrooms onto Joseph Street. And clearly we left that option on the table thinking that we could have a brand new facility for only $400,000. And I'm thinking that if we had the finer information, that we might not have ruled out a bunch of other locations at this point. So I guess, again, my question to staff is, would a reopening of potential locations help get the washrooms put in the park sooner? And if so, obviously that would require a future reconsideration.
Well,
through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, that is a political decision, so council can certainly do that. We would require reconsideration of the previous motion to say that it was a new facility. So if council wishes us to do that, we would look to you for direction. If you're looking for a rescoping of the size and so on, we'd probably have to consider public consultation again, because it would change significantly what they were consulted on in the first place.
Okay. Well, I guess as collectively as council will think to it, I would like to see the location issue come back at some point. But I would also be very clear that I would like to see the boathouse option off the table. Like, that's clear that that's not going to work at any point in the future. But we'll save that for a later date.
Just as a matter of comment, and maybe subject to the clarification from the city clerk, reconsideration of this motion that's been defeated cannot take place again in a similar manner for the term that we are still here, unless it's a totally different scenario. Yeah. Councillor Gazzola.
Yes, I'd like to carry on from where Councillor Davey is going. We defeated a motion to reconsider the tender. Now, when we were asking staff questions earlier, they said there were ways of perhaps reducing the costs and looking at things differently, but you said it was a moot subject because we didn't have time to do that. So you didn't go into that. Can we not ask, without any reconsideration, can we not ask staff to relook at this whole scenario with the aims of reducing the costs or what have you, and to bring back another report? Like, we've turned down the tender. We haven't. I think there's no one around this horseshoe that doesn't agree that we need to get more washrooms there. So we need to move on with that. I think what we voted for today was that we're going to go alone. We're not going with the $200,000 from the federal government. But we still need the washrooms. We need to look at ways of redrawing this thing up. You know, what can we do? Let's give ourselves another opportunity to rethink this whole thing. Can we not do that? Can we not give staff that direction and move on?
Councillor Houston? It's not Councillor. I'm calling Houston.
Two things. If council wants us to expand the review to include renovation of existing facilities or additions to other facilities, we would have to reconsider the motion that you passed in February that said we were building a new washroom facility. So you'd have to reconsider that if you want to include those other options. If you want us to go back and rescope a smaller washroom that would be within the $200,000 of funding that we've got set aside, you're open to do that.
Put a motion forward that we ask staff to do that. I'm happy to live with not looking at the other things, to keep that previous resolution that we passed whole, but to look at, are there ways that we can work around this to get something that we can afford?
Is that direction to staff?
And I'd like to move a recommendation that we do that we ask staff to look at that.
Okay.
Because I think we do. Nobody questions the fact that we need washrooms.
Yeah. I'll take the motion. Do I have a seconder? Okay, Councillor Davey, but I've got somebody else ahead of you. Yeah. So, Councillor Kelly Galloway, ZLOC.
Yeah, if I understand what the motion says, I still, and I would look to the clerk to, if I understand what Councillor Gazzola is saying, it would still need a notice or a reconsideration on the February 25th resolution, because it clearly says that we've picked option 3 and that it gives the actual location of the facility. So if we're looking at any other location and or option, we need to reconsider that motion. So I just put that out there, but I do, one of the other reasons why I actually rang in is because I'm noticing a bunch of the development community coming in, and I think they need to be aware that we are very far behind and will probably at least be another hour or more before we get to growth management. So I say that in case you want to go and get a coffee somewhere, but we're at least probably an hour plus out. So anyway, I would ask the clerk to clarify, if I understand Councillor Gazzola right, if that still requires reconsideration.
Okay. This button on. You put your button on, please.
Did not deal with location. I said I'm prepared to forego that. I know I'm not sure how Councillor Davey feels about that. I'm prepared to forego the location, deal with the location that we have, and to try to work around that within our means.
In its current location?
Yes. In what? Yeah.
Then I have a question of staff in asking what type of resources would be required in order to attempt to rescope that, and if I would realistically ask probably Cynthia for her expertise in saying, is there any remote possibility we're going to be able to build a facility for $200,000? And if it's, because my point is it a waste of time? Is a moot exercise just to come back and say, no?
Through the chair, we can certainly look at the exercise. As I stated before, we built a concession stand in 2007 that has one fixture for males, one fixture for females, and it was $400,000. So I think if we're looking at staying within a $200,000 budget, we're going to be significantly challenged to build something for $200,000. If you add, the heritage planning application on top of that, I think we'll struggle.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just quickly going to make a comment because there's a motion on the floor. I do have to go relieve my babysitter, and I would like to be present for the motion, so I'll be watching in the back room in order to come out. But if I can ask you just to hold the vote to give me a minute to run out so I can vote on the motion, I'll just say, while I truly support the bathrooms as I voted for the reconsideration of the initial motion, I can't support looking at a facility that's $200,000 in the location because it, as we've just heard, it's not something that's really feasible for the community.
Thank you. Just to add,
$1,000. I said, go back and let's see what we can do. Okay, we've heard it from the delegates that, you know, if we put our heads together, let's see what we can do. There was never any mention of $200,000.
okay, thank you. Just to let the people who've just walked in, and as mentioned by Councillor Galloway Zelock, that we are quite a bit behind. We're still on the special council meeting that started around 2:30 or so, and we're still on the first item. This could be another hour, roughly, before we even get to the planning and strategic services meeting that's scheduled for 5 o'clock of the two items. So I just thought I'd just bring that to attention. And then after we finish the special council meeting, we'll take maybe a 5-minute break so we can get our act together and clerks can change their positions, and then we'll continue on as best as we can. I have a list of councillors who still want to speak, and I think I'll continue with that. Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. I just want to be really quick. I think that we recognize that there's a need for the washrooms. I think that there is an opportunity for us to rescope this facility. There was a number of suggestions made even by the delegation as well as myself, and I would be very interested to see what we could do in a time frame of the next couple of weeks to see if we can rescope it and bring it back to the same location. I think there is that opportunity. I think that we should be looking at that. There is information out there that the costs can be substantially reduced. So I really think that that's what we need to be looking at.
Councillor Scott Davey.
Thank you. I just need some clarification. I think that we're handcuffing staff. We identified a location based on a budget, essentially, and now they were over budget and we're still holding them to the same location. So I really think we need to reconsider the location before we try and rescope it or set a dollar amount or anything like that, because there's going to be a very large difference between the cost of putting washrooms in Joseph Street, an existing facility, versus standalone. So I would encourage the mover actually to withdraw the motion, we reconsider the location, and then bring the motion forward.
Councillor Gasola.
Yeah, I don't have, I think we can't just throw up our hands and walk away and say that's it, okay? So I'm just, you know, we've made the points loud and clear that we need washrooms. It's quite loud and clear that we don't want them, we can't use them at the existing boathouse, but we do need something. And I'm asking staff to go back and let's relook at it. I haven't put a price on it. If you want to change that location, go back to that, that's fine. But we need to move forward. We don't just take our marbles and go home and say we lost and that's it. Well, let's keep moving forward.
Councillor Singh.
When I say this, please, I say it with all due respect. People, we can't be talking on both sides of our mouth. We just said no to this because of the cost overruns. We knew very well that it was going to cost us $150,000 more than we had anticipated. Now that we're not going to proceed with this, we're going to lose the CIF funding. That's $200,000. If you rescope this, it's still relatively going to cost more than $200,000. How can we say no once and then go back again to the same taxpayers? Oh wait, I was very conscious to save you money, but now, you know what, I'm okay with paying $350,000 or $400,000. Now that $400,000 is going to entirely come out of your pocket, whereas before it was only going to be $350,000. Or it's still going to cost the same it would have before, but now we have a smaller facility. So we have to be cognizant of that. Now, staff have been very clear. If they have to rescope, they have to go through rescoping process. It's going to take time. It can't happen overnight. They have to go through heritage. There's time aspect of that. They have to go through the public input process. Now, Councillor Gazzola, I'm supportive because I agree with you that bathrooms are needed there. I would like it to be rescoped. I would like an opportunity to still take advantage of the CIF funding. I don't want to support this project if the CIF funding is void of it. then I agree with Councillor Davies that we have to look at other locations as well so we can be in tune to the allowed budget that we originally said. And that's why all the no votes, and that's why I didn't support it to begin with. So unless you're recommending, and I'll support you, that we have to be cognizant of that time frame, and because of that, we want to maintain the savings. Let's skip the heritage process. Let's skip the public input process, give direction to staff, rescope the project, and bring it back to us next meeting. I'll support you. If that's what you're saying.
No, I'm not saying that, because it's not possible within a week to bring back. We voted here, and the vote here today was to forego the federal funding. That was the whole crux of the vote. Okay, it wasn't a question of whether we have washrooms or we don't. That's not the question here. Okay.
Councillor Edington.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm very disappointed in this. The public went to great lengths to choose this location. They went to great lengths to get involved. I'm not going to say what we've done to the public. They strongly suggested they wanted washrooms. I agree we still need washrooms, but I don't believe that I don't believe we can build these washrooms in a heritage way to meet all the requirements of the park at the kind of cost that people are throwing around here. As I said, I want the washrooms, but I don't believe it's feasible with the money we've got now at our disposal. It's not feasible without the federal $200,000. Councillor Gazzola and his supporters just kiss goodbye to that federal $200,000. As I say, I want the washrooms. People want washrooms. I don't know where we go from here, but I certainly don't see any clarity in Councillor Gazzola's motion. All I see is squirming and talking out of both sides of the mouth. Thank you.
Okay, I have no further speakers, although I'll add my comments. Certainly been an interesting afternoon of discussion and debate and opinion. We have been in different directions from either supporting or not supporting. We've had our position in terms of the difficulty and the challenges of trying to address the funding that we're getting, the grant money, the overspending in terms of the way the tender came in, the need to have washrooms, hearing the delegations. It's really been a crappy topic, unfortunately, but that's just the way it's been. I think, in my opinion, that a comment and a motion by Councillor Gazzola, I'm prepared to support it. I think also that a suggestion that was made earlier about maybe phasing it with a pouring of the foundation and then coming back with a second part, that staff take that into consideration as part of that motion. I appreciate also the comment made by Mr. Wilmer that the $200,000 is available, and if the project is not totally completed, we may not get all of it, but we may get portions of it, depending what the percentage is. So I think that there is some opportunity here to still capitalize on moving forward and having the washrooms. I voted against it. I didn't really want to, but I was not happy with the 40% increase in the budget in the tender that came forward. I was not happy. I should not happy, but I know that the $200,000 that comes as a grant from the federal government is really coming from me and from all of us. I mean, I pay my taxes for my right pocket property taxes and my left pocket income tax. It still comes from me. It still comes from all of us. So it's not money that's lost. It's money that basically that I would be spending regardless. So I'm still paying for it one way or the other. I'm prepared now to call a vote. Record a vote. Now I've still got a couple of comments, but we've already spoken. Everybody's spoken already once. I'm sorry? Oh, clarify the motion. I will ask Councillor Gazzola to bring forward the motion again, because I didn't write it down. Mr. Gazzola, Councillor Gazzola? Or does the clerk have it? If you can repeat the motion.
Through the chair, the motion is that staff be directed to rescope the project to construct a new washroom facility in Victoria Park in the vicinity of the parking lot at the corner of Jubilee Drive and David Street.
That's the motion. Everybody clear on that? I'll ask Mr. Wilmer first.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Staff would ask for clarification on timing. What is council's expectation as to when that would come back?
I have before me the calendar of schedule of meetings. We have council meeting next Monday. Then the following Monday is Thanksgiving Day. And then the Monday after that, which would be October the 21st, is committee day. Just so you have an idea as to where.
So, Mr. Chair, with your indulgence then, I think the question to the councillor who raised the motion, or who moved the motion, is that his intent, that we come back in, say, 3 weeks with that? Or is it there's no more urgency to this? We're not talking about CIIF funding. We want to avoid winter construction. Are we really talking about taking a reasonable amount of time to do a proper job of this? And that the solution will not be in place for spring of 2014, but that during the 2014 park usage season, we're talking about temporary washrooms, and that any solution we arrive at here will probably be not in place until the end of the construction season in 2014 at the earliest.
Thank you. Councillor Davey, I'll have everybody another opportunity.
Sorry, and just, this is convoluted, but again, I don't think there's really much chance of anything coming back in terms of the same price and the same location. So the only way I can see out of this in terms of moving the location is moving deferral of this for 5 minutes and dealing with reconsideration of the location and then dealing with it immediately afterwards. So I would move deferral of Councillor Gazzola's motion and then in place immediately move reconsideration of the location of the future washrooms, and then we'll come back to Councillor Gazzola's motion.
So you want deferral for how long?
Immediately after we deal with the reconsideration of the location. So again,
this
what I'm
is
saying
more
is
convoluted.
What I'm saying is, if we tell staff to go and build the exact same washrooms in the exact same place for less money, we all know it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's a waste of staff's time. The point has to be that staff has to be open to looking at other locations in the park, and the only way to do that is to reconsider the report I had written down, INS 13-015, which is where we specifically say staff cannot consider any location other than the existing one that we're speaking about. So the only way to get around this mess is to have a motion to reconsider the location and then bring back Councillor Gazzola's motion so that staff can look at any area that we looked at in the past in terms of building it inside of another structure, such as the Joseph Street one. So I would move deferral of Councillor Gazzola's motion for like 5 minutes until we deal with the reconsideration of the location.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask the clerk for a clarification as to what was suggested by Councillor Davey. We can go in that particular direction. I'm looking for your assistance here.
Through the chair, a motion to defer would be in order. However, Councillor Gazzola's motion would need to be to amend the motion that will be coming back through the reconsideration.
Can you do what? Can you do what, sorry?
Can I move my motion off the table until we deal with the reconsideration?
Yes. Yeah, you can withdraw your motion and then deal with the reconsideration.
I'll withdraw it for 5 minutes.
Okay, so you've withdrawn your motion. Okay, so back to Councillor Davey.
Okay, I just simply move that that staff be permitted to reconsider the location with respect to work already done, specifically excluding adding on to the boathouse.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that all again, please, for me? I was trying to understand where you were coming. Oh, I'm sorry. Fine. Thank you.
Sorry, strike the part about the boathouse, simply reconsidering the limiting location at present.
Considering?
Reconsidering the current location for the washrooms.
Okay, so we're not having a deferral. We're having just a consideration of whether we will be in this location. Do you have a comment?
Through the chair, just to provide clarification, it would be reconsideration of the motion that was passed at the February 25th Planning Strategic Initiative Committee meeting, and it can be found on page 2 of the staff report.
So we would need 2/3 majority?
Correct.
Did you want this motion read from the February 25th meeting? No? Okay, so we have a motion here to reconsider the location of the washrooms in Victoria Park. And we need 2/3 majority for reconsideration.
Thank you. Sorry, I was trying to squeeze myself in for a while now, but it's okay. Question of staff regarding that. Personal opinion first, I think we're going to spend more money in staff time and consultants than the actual bathroom. That's a sad thing about it, because we can't make up our mind. How much more time and consultant time and input would be required for having both two phases? Because what I'm hearing, there's still two schools of thought. We still want to look at the existing site, and we want to look at additional other sites as well. Staff be able to clarify what type of staff component would be involved with this? Or can we just recirculate what we had before?
Through the chair, Councillor Singh, if I understand you correctly, you're asking how much staff time to do a two-phased?
No, well,
approach?
that too. I still think that's a good idea. I'm talking about what Councillor Davey wants to do, which is look at other sites, and on top of rescoping the project at the existing site that council had approved before.
Realistically, to come back with concrete numbers, we gave very high-level numbers in our last report. So I think the learning is we want to take some time and make sure that we've got good detail in front of council. Right. So in terms of us having a project ready to tender within the next month, we probably need a longer time than that.
Okay. And my comment to Councillor Davies would be, this is still on the table. Councillor Davies, it's not going to go away. We have to look at the existing site and still, whatever we can do, try to still leverage on the CFF funding and give staff that opportunity. But to just, give up on it, I think it's very foolish of us to do so. I know we said no to the tender. I'm hearing we said no to the CIF funding. We didn't say no to that. We just said no to that tender. And to already look at a different site, we've already defeated and said no, we don't want to leverage on that funding at all. I think that should come at a later point, especially because it will take extensive process, and it can come in later meetings as well.
Thank you. Sorry, can staff comment? Is there, now that the tender's been voted down, is there any chance that we can now still use the CIF funding? Period.
Through the acting mayor, in my opinion, there is not.
Thank you.
Sorry, the answer is not?
There is not.
Right. Thank you. You're next.
Actually, I may convolute the water a little bit more. I am actually, this issue, we're throwing all kinds of ideas out here right now, so I'm actually going to defer the motion on the floor until October 21st and make sure that we allot time on our next committee meeting to deal with this issue and just make sure that we have all the reports that have been distributed on the washrooms in our committee package for the 21st. I think we need to allot more time to this instead of trying to make rash decisions today. Obviously, there's no time urgency on this anymore. As we've just heard, the CIF funding is already been voted against. So I think a deferral of this matter until at least the 21st on all reconsiderations and motions are probably the best route so we don't make any rash decisions here today.
So that would only be time.
Councillor Etherington.
Yeah, I think that's the smartest thing that's been said for some time. I think we need to defer this in order to get a full council here to get some sanity back into this debate. So I would support a deferral.
Okay, I have no further requests for speaking. Okay, seconded by Councillor Singh. A recorded vote has been requested. This is for deferral for staff reconsideration to October the 21st, Monday, which is a committee day, and staff will come back with a report with some new direction based on discussion that we had.
I'm not asking for any new report. I'm just asking for time set aside and all reports that have dealt with the Victoria Park washroom issue to be added in our packages, and then us as a council can give direction to staff moving forward. So there's no recommendation, just reports.
Okay, I have no further questions. So a recorded vote for deferral to October the 21st for, as Councillor Kelly Zielak has mentioned, to bring back the staff reports that have been previously presented. Councillor Singh, this is under deferral?
No, it's already done. Everyone's already voted. No? I did.
Oh, so calling for the vote now? Okay. Everybody's voting? Here we go.
Did.
Okay, motion's been approved.
Mr. Chair, so what I had my hand up for was for, I still don't want to take the defeat just because staff think that we can't make reasonable time because of the CIF funding. What I propose, as in splitting in 2 phases, I'm not asking staff to make a determination on that today, but I would like to get some information with some, full scope of understanding of what I have in mind. And please, if they could bring a report back, if it could be done to next committee meeting or next council meeting, which would be next week.
Why should it come back before the 21st?
That's to do with the existing project, Councillor Gazzola.
The whole issue's been deferred to October the 21st. That should go on with it.
To my understanding, that was what Councillor Davies had in mind, but if it would require a committee vote, I can propose that as a motion and we can take a vote accordingly. And Councillor Gazzola can vote no.
Let me just clarify this. You're bringing this back to a committee?
No, I meant to say council. If the relevant information can be brought back to next week council meeting to speak to if the project can be split up into 2 phases so that we can still lay the foundation and then the project can be rescoped. I'm not asking for an answer now. I'm just asking for an answer with appropriate time and reflection on it by staff. And I don't think it has to be as extensive for next week.
Based on what Councillor Singh has said, does Mr. Wilmer or anybody else from staff have a comment on that? Hang on a sec.
The only comment would be that we would prefer a direction or a motion of council.
Okay, that's my motion.
A motion of council?
Yes.
Is that what you said?
A resolution from council.
A resolution?
No, for next week.
Are you finished, Councillor Singh?
The reason why I say Councillor Galway-Selak 21st would be too late. It's appropriately because of the foundation, laying the foundation before the frost. And if it's after the 21st, I think we may have missed that date. That's the only reason.
I'm
still running after the train.
I'm sorry to belabor this, but I think I understand where you're coming from, Councillor Singh, and I appreciate that, and I love the funding. That's why I was supporting it all along. Unfortunately, I don't know that I can support the motion to try and bring information forward next week because we're going to be in the exact same scenario that we're in today, where there's people who want reconsideration votes and there's people who want to see a rescoping votes. And so to bring that information forward in phasing, I think should come back with the larger discussion. So I would see if that's information you want to bring it back on the 21st. And I would also suggest if other members of council have ideas of what to do with the washrooms, that they ask staff to bring that back on the 21st, because I really think at the end of the day we need to be done with this issue. So I would suggest if you want that information, that it comes back on the 21st. I don't know that I can support it coming back at council.
Well, that's what puzzles me. I think we just went through a vote for deferral to October the 21st, and everybody supported except myself, and Councillor Singh supported it. And now he wants to bring it forward to next Monday.
It's for information. So because we are on a very tight timeline, it's only for information, for staff to bring information back to council, not for us to determine on. And if at that point, the committee or council at that point wants to delay to the 21st, that's fine. But provided that staff can give us appropriate input, that it's not too prolonged, that can still be done. If it can be split up into two phases, it can still be done after the October 21st timeline, depending on the season.
Okay.
I'm only asking for information here.
Oh, thank you. Based on your comments, based on Mr. Wilmer's comments, that we need a resolution. So if I have a motion on that, we can move forward. If we don't, then that's the end of the topic. Okay. This case moved by Councillor Singh and seconded by Councillor Davey, that some information be brought forward back to next Monday's council meeting, as outlined by Councillor Singh. Okay. I'm sorry? Well, you push a button.
Yeah, I'd like to move an amendment that then information be brought back on October the 21st.
You can't do that. That's
what?
No, because we already had the motion approved to come back on the 21st, and you're just amending the motion to go back to the same thing. To me, it doesn't make sense.
No, it's on his motion.
No, I know it's an amendment to it, but I'll ask the clerk for clarification there, please.
Through the chair, as Councillor Singh's motion is predicated based on timing of when he can get the information back to proceed with the two phases, by deferring it to the 21st would negate the intent, so that amendment would not be considered germane.
Yeah, so if Councillor Gazola's amendment is not germane, so it's unacceptable, basically. So we have to then deal with the motion that's been tabled by Councillor Singh. Okay. And somebody said recorded vote? Yes. I'm sorry? Yes, recorded vote. Okay, thank you. Okay, everybody can vote? Whoops. Okay, it's been approved. I think we've finished now with this topic, and we will move on to item number 2 on the agenda. The boathouse request for a proposal. Rod Rogier, is he still here? Oh, Mr. Wilmer.
Before Mr. Regier introduces this, may I suggest to Council that in the interest of time, this may be a matter which you can deal with very quickly. It's a fairly routine RFP proposal. We're simply suggesting it be done in 2 stages. The only thing that's unusual about this is the evaluation criteria are included in the report halfway down page 2. There are 6 of them. There's 100 points. It's fairly straightforward. So unless there's a member of the community that's here to speak to this, I would suggest this is a matter that Council should be able to deal with little or no discussion.
Okay. I do not have any delegations registered here. And Mr. Rogier, do you want to make an abridged version comment? Oh, hang on. Let me just click you on here.
Certainly. Thank you very much. Yes, so what we're proposing is a two-stage request for proposal process in order to minimize the initial investment by interested parties and then and the evaluation process by staff, and allowing us a little bit more time to develop, to have serious proponents develop detailed business plans and have those business plans be given due consideration before bringing back the final recommendations to Council. As Mr. Wilmer has indicated, it's a fairly standard RFP process, and we're prepared to expedite it, hopefully with the objective of finding a suitable operator by the end of the year.
Thank you. I have no questions of staff. Okay, moved by Councillor Singh. Second by Councillor Davey. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. And we have one third item that has come on, and I'll ask Kim Kugler to come forward and speak to the matter. And you have that circulated to you in your package as a late addition. And just as a reminder, because this item is an add-on, is deemed to be of an urgent nature where the reasons of timing is not possible due to delay consideration of the subsequent meeting, it may be considered only with the consent of 2/3 of the members present. So I need a motion first before Kim. Okay, so I need a motion first for consideration of this. Councillor Fernandez, second to Councillor Davey. Any discussion? All those in favor? Against? Okay, approved. Okay, Ms. Kugler.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm here today to ask to seek 3 informal quotes as opposed to the normal purchasing requirement of 3 formal quotes. And it's based on urgency. We actually had this chiller replacement scheduled for 2014, but due to deterioration as we were getting ready to fire up the system, that it needs to be replaced this season. And in order to deliver and actually seek out and either manufacture or source from another area the chiller, we need to move forward with this so we can have something on the street tomorrow to gain quotes and award it late tomorrow evening or first thing Wednesday.
Any questions of staff? Seeing none, call for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. I'm sorry? Okay, move the bylaws are moved for 3 readings by Councillor Scott Davey. Any discussion? Oh, hang on a second. Let me just get my package here. I want to know what I'm dealing with. I know it's here somewhere. There it is. Okay, I got a motion. Do I have a second? Motion by Scott Davey, a seconder. Councillor Singh. Is there any additional bylaws? No? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We have a second part and third parts to go through as well, right? On the second page? Up? No? We're done. Okay, so we have a motion to adjourn. Councillor Fernandez? All those in favor? Approved. Thank you. It's now 5:33, and